I want a pretty large slab, so I'm going to use a 4-inch pipe. And what you're going to want to do is cover this with some paper. So the paper itself doesn't really matter. You can use any kind of paper. You're going to wrap the paper around your tube, whatever your tube is. Plumbing pipes work best. You don't have to use one. If your piece of clay is a 1/4 inch, then you'll want to overlap by a full inch. You have your paper here, and you do a full inch, just about there, right on that little blue dot. What I can do is just take this, line it up, and tear it off. Or if it's not tearing, you can take a sharp knife or an X-Acto knife or something, make a line, and cut the rest off. It's not very important, but what is important is wrapping this correctly and making sure that it overlaps by an inch for a 1/4 inch slab. So then I'm going to lay this out, and now that's telling me how wide my piece of clay needs to be to go around the circumference of this pipe. So I line my paper up with the edge so I can have my cylinder be as tall as I want. I'm just going to kind of wedge it into the corner there. And then I'm going to put this on top, line it up. I'm going to hold my hand and then cut. Make sure you hold the ruler with your hand, or whatever straight edge you're using. And then I'm going to line it up on this side as well. I might move it first because these things tend to get stuck. It's best if you use like a wood surface or a canvas surface. Canvas is best. I'm going to line this up again, square onto the clay. I'm going to line my straight edge up, and then I'm going to cut. Now, to get this in line with the bottom, I'm going to actually measure it and see how tall I want it. A little bit taller than it is wide is nice for this shape, so let's see. I think 5 inches looks good for this because it's 4 inches wide. So I'm going to mark 5 inches here. And I'm going to mark 5 inches here. And that will be the height of my cup. And then I'll use another straight edge. And I'm going to cut. It's easier for me to cut this way, but for the sake of the camera, I'm cutting this way. And then I'm going to remove this clay and save it because I might need it later, or I can make another cylinder out of that. I also saved this piece here because I can maybe use it for the bottom. So that's off to the side. And then I take my piece of paper, and it doesn't matter how this fits on here now, but I'm just going to wrap it around. And then I'm going to tuck it inside like this. And make sure all the paper is on the inside of the cylinder. Then I'm going to position it because my cylinder is really long. I got it from Home Depot and never cut it down. So I'm going to just use it without cutting it, which is kind of difficult. And I'm just going to roll it. Roll this onto here and see that it's long enough, which it is. And then what I'm going to do is take my needle tool and I'm going to score all of this here. And you want each of these lines that you put here to be about a 1/16 inch apart. and you can add the slip to the crack. Not too much, but enough to glue it together. Depending on how dry this is, you can do the top and the bottom, but mine's pretty wet, so I'm just going to do one side. You could also do it without slip, but only if your clay was really wet when you do this. And then you're just going to add some pressure and try to even the wall out and squeeze it all together. If you don't have a 1/4 inch here, then you'll have to pick up your piece and do the thing where you kind of just wobble it, and that will lengthen it a little bit more. But mine was fine. So now I'm going to pick this up and kind of put it down like that. You can take this out if you want, or you can leave it in. It'll keep its shape better if you leave it in the cylinder, but for the sake of the video, I'm going to move this around a lot, so it's easier for me to just do this. And my bottom isn't wide enough, so what I'm going to do is add these two pieces of clay together. So I'm just going to score this. Just one line, one way is fine. Then I'm going to take a coil and add it in. And I can just cut that off and add a coil. Again, if it's too dry, you want to use slip, but my clay is nice. It's not too dry or too wet, so I don't need to add anything special. Then I'm going to flip this over. I used this surface with red clay, and you can tell it's starting to take the appearance of the red clay. I'm not concerned about that, but some people are. And so if I was concerned, I would use a different surface for red and white clay. But I'm not concerned, so I'm just going to use the same surface. The red shows up, but it doesn't show up enough for me to be freaked out about it. Clay isn't ever going to be perfect, so it's fine that it has some sort of imperfection, even if that's like a little spot or blemish from another type of clay. And that's my opinion. Other people have their own opinions on that. Potters tend to get a little crazy when it comes to how to do things. So then you're just going to set your cylinder on top, and then you can change the shape. You could like make it oval by kind of squishing the top. And then what I'm going to do is trace that at the bottom all the way around. I'm going to remove this, making sure to keep the shape the same as it is now. Then I'm going to cut this straight down, and I can use my knife or my needle tool. Either one is fine. And you're just going to try and keep your tool straight up and down. It's better for you to cut a little bit more wide than cut too close to the line and cut off part of the clay, because it's easier to subtract clay than it is to add. I'm just going to remove that. Then I'm going to put this on and just do a dry fit. A dry fit just means I'm looking at it to make sure it fits correctly still. And once I find that out, then I will take this off again to the side. I'll score this. Because what this does is it roughs up the pieces of clay so that when they lock together, it's harder to take apart. If they're just butted up against each other, it's easy to take apart. Then I'm going to do the same thing with the bottom of this. I'll just flip it over. Try not to change the shape or orientation of your clay too much, because clay has a memory and it will bend back to the way it was before in the firing process. Maybe not when you make it, but after you make it. It helps to hold it sometimes because this is a wet construction. You want this to be as moist as possible while still retaining its form. not like when you do dry slab construction. Okay, so that's gonna work. So then I'm gonna take my slip, I'm just gonna goop it up once again. You can use a paintbrush if you don't want to put it on your fingers. It might actually work better. I'm just lazy, if I'm completely honest with myself. And I'm just kind of pushing down and rocking back and forth. You can kind of see at the bottom when I do that, the slip squeezes out a tiny bit right at the bottom. One way we can get this to stick together is to use a reinforcement coil, which you can do. But this way I'm going to show compression by tapping it. And you want to tap really lightly onto your piece. And be very delicate with the form because it's delicate right now. So you're just going to tap gently. Very gently. And that should about do it. Then you can smooth out the inside with either your finger, or you can use sometimes the back side of your throwing stick, also known as a ceramic sculpting tool, or if you have one of these guys, you can get in there, smooth things out, make it look real pretty inside. Because no one wants gritty, nasty holes or places where bacteria can form. So the inside of your pot is almost more important to be completely finished and thought about than the outside. You can leave that line in there. There should still maybe be a line you can see right in there where the two parts joined. That shows that it was hand built, which is kind of cool. And then what I do at the bottom of the foot, if there's a ton of clay, like here there's a little bit excess, so I might cut that off. But don't cut too much off. But generally I'll just take my metal rib, I'll curve it a little around the side, and then I'll just pull up. I keep my other hand on the inside as kind of a support. And then I just pick up and turn around the piece. For things like this, if you don't want to pick things up so much, it's easier to work on like any sort of surface. You can pick it up and just leave it on something that you can turn it around on. This makes it a little bit easier. And then just compress the clay all the way around up the side. The less you handle your clay, the better for its shape. But that'll help round your corner out very nicely. You just don't want someone trying to drink out of this or use it and then like totally cut their hand open. If you use your fingers like this, it might stretch it more, so be gentle. And if you do want to stretch open your clay more, then go ahead and use your fingers. There's always multiple ways to do everything. I kind of just decide on the fly. So that's basically how you would make a cylinder. If you want to, you can flip it over and work on the bottom a little more, smoothing it out, making it pretty. Cutting it if need be, if there's extra clay. Here I don't have enough clay, so I'm probably going to use scoring. I'm very lazy and I always lose my tools while I'm working, so that's why I'm using a knife. Scoring and adding a little coil in here. And that will take care of that. And then I can just smooth it in like this. Same here. And then if you want it smoother and gentler, you can just use a piece of paper to smooth that out and make the line less harsh. Because when the clay gets fired, it turns into a knife basically. It could cut your